The words hung in the air between us, his expectant face illuminated by the afternoon light streaming through our living room windows. I stood there, balancing precariously on my walker, the surgical incision on my thigh throbbing beneath the loose fabric of my sweatpants, courtesy of a fall in the grocery store parking lot 2 days ago. I just got home, David, I managed, my mouth suddenly dry. I haven't even sat down yet. My son, my only child, 43 years old with salt and pepper hair at the temples, barely glanced up from his phone. Yeah, but it's almost 6. Dad always had dinner ready by 6. Dad, my James, gone 5 years now, but apparently still the measuring stick by which my performance was judged. I bit back the words that threatened to spill out. That James had retired at 60 while I was still working part-time at the library until my accident. That James had never undergone major surgery and been sent home the same day due to insurance restrictions. Instead, I tightened my grip on the walker and said, "There are leftovers in the fridge. The casserole Mrs. Abernathy brought over yesterday." David frowned. "The tuna thing? I had that for lunch." He stretched, his 6'2" frame taking up most of the couch. My couch, in my house, where he'd been staying temporarily for the past 18 months after his divorce from Shelley. The same couch where I desperately needed to sit before my legs gave out. "I'm sorry, honey. I'll make something as soon as I rest for a minute," I said, inching forward. The pain medication was wearing off, and each step sent jolts of fire up my right side. He sighed dramatically. "Never mind, I'll order pizza," dismissing me as he scrolled through delivery options. "You want anything?" I didn't answer immediately. I couldn't. The realization was settling over me like a cold, heavy blanket. My son, the baby boy I had nursed through chickenpox and heartbreaks, whose college education I had worked overtime to help finance, whose wedding I had spent my modest savings to make special, saw me not as a person recovering from major trauma, but as an inconvenience to his dinner schedule. "Mom, pizza?" he prompted, irritated now. "No, thank you," I finally answered, my voice sounding distant even to my own ears. "I'm not very hungry." Each step a small battle against pain and something else, a growing understanding that perhaps the dynamics in my household needed serious reconsideration. As I lowered myself carefully onto my bed, I glanced at the photograph on my nightstand, James and me on our 35th anniversary, his arm around my waist. Both of us smiling into a future we thought we understood. "Oh, James," I whispered, "what would you think of our boy now?" The pain pills were in my purse, which David had tossed carelessly on my dresser. I'd have to get up again to reach them. Explained about his difficult divorce, his struggles with his career in real estate during the market downturn. Now I wondered if perhaps Margaret had seen what I had been too close to notice. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was my daughter-in-law, Shelley. "Heard about your surgery. Hope you're okay." The girls missed their grandma. Attached was a photo of my granddaughters, Emma and Lily, holding up hand-drawn get-well cards. My heart squeezed at the sight of their gap-toothed smiles. Since the divorce, David had made it increasingly difficult for me to see the girls, claiming that Shelley used them as pawns and that my maintaining a relationship with her somehow undermined him. The truth, which I rarely allowed myself to acknowledge, was that David's gambling had destroyed their marriage, and Shelley had every reason to protect herself and the children from his financial recklessness. I heard the front door slam and knew David had gone outside to meet the pizza delivery. Using the moment of privacy, I texted Shelley back, "Thank you, dear. Surgery went well, but recovery will take time. Give the girls big hugs from Grandma. Miss you all." I reached for my purse and extracted the pill bottle with shaking hands. As I swallowed one with water from the glass I'd left on my nightstand that morning, I made a decision. Tomorrow I would call Margaret, not to complain about David, but to start making plans. It was time to reclaim my home, my life, and my dignity. James would have expected no less of me. The morning light filtered through my bedroom curtains, painting patterns on the quilted bedspread James's mother had made for our wedding. I'd barely slept between the surgical pain and the emotional turmoil churning inside me. But in those quiet, pain-soaked hours, clarity had come. I reached for my phone on the nightstand and dialed Margaret's number before I could talk myself out of it. "Ellen, is everything all right? It's not even 7 there." Margaret's voice carried the slight raspiness of recent sleep. "I had surgery yesterday, broke my femur." "What? Oh my God, Ellen! Are you in the hospital? Do you need me to come?" I closed my eyes, savoring the immediate concern in my sister's voice. "They sent me home yesterday. Insurance wouldn't cover an overnight stay." "That's barbaric! Who's taking care of you?" "Not. David's here," I interrupted, knowing exactly where she was headed. "That's what I was afraid of," Margaret muttered. "What happened when you got home? Did he at least have dinner ready for you?" A hollow laugh escaped me before I could stop it. Actually, he asked me what I was making for his dinner. The silence on the other end of the line spoke volumes. When Margaret finally responded, her voice was controlled but trembling with anger. "Ellen, listen to me. You need to get out of there." "That's why I'm calling," I admitted. "I think it's time I visited Arizona." "Thank God," Margaret exhaled. "But not as a visit. Come stay with Robert and me, for as long as you need. Forever if you want. We have the guest house. It's small, but it has everything you'd need, and it's all on one level. Perfect for recovery." "I can't just leave, Marge. This is my home. I raised David here. James and I—" "James would be heartbroken to see how his son is treating you," Margaret cut in. "You know that as well as I do." I did know. In the quiet darkness of last night, I'd imagined James sitting beside me, his weathered hand covering mine, his voice gentle but firm. "Ellie girl, you deserve better than this. You always have." "I need to think it through," I told Margaret. "Make a plan." "Of course you do. You always were the sensible one." I could hear the relief in her voice. "But promise me you'll really consider it. We want you here, Elle. Robert's been saying for years that the guest house is just waiting for you." Outside my bedroom, I heard movement, the heavy footfalls of my son heading to the kitchen. "I promise. I should go, but I'll call you again tomorrow." "Wait, who's driving you to physical therapy appointments? You can't drive with a broken leg." I hadn't even thought that far ahead. "I don't know. I'll have to figure something out." "Ellen." Margaret's tone turned serious. "Call Shelley. See if she can help. And don't tell David you're thinking of moving until we have a solid plan in place. You know how he gets when he thinks he's losing control of a situation." The warning was unnecessary. In recent years, I'd become well acquainted with my son's volatile temper, especially when it came to anything that might affect his comfortable living arrangement. "I won't. Love you, Marge." "Love you too. Ice that leg and stay off it as much as possible." I ended the call and lay back against my pillows, mentally preparing for the day ahead. I needed to check my bank accounts, contact my doctor about physical therapy, reach out to Shelley, and quietly begin the process of disentangling my life from my son's stranglehold. A sharp knock at my door startled me. Without waiting for a response, David pushed it open. "There's no coffee," he announced, as if this were a failing on my part rather than a simple fact. "I haven't been shopping since before the accident," I replied, struggling to sit up. "There should be tea bags in the pantry." He made a face. "I need coffee to function, Mom. You know that." I bit back a retort about how he seemed to function just fine when it came to his online poker tournaments that kept him up until the small hours. Instead, I said, "There's a Starbucks on your way to the unemployment office." His expression darkened. "I told you I have some promising leads. The market's tough right now." The promising leads had been the same refrain for over a year, yet somehow he still had money for poker sites and pizza delivery. I knew from conversations with Shelley that he was months behind on child support, claiming financial hardship while living rent-free in my home. "I'm sure something will turn up soon," I said neutrally. "In the meantime, I need to ask you a favor. I have to schedule physical therapy appointments, but I won't be able to drive for a while. Could you take me?" The look on his face, a flash of inconvenience barely masked by dutiful resignation, told me everything I needed to know about where I stood in his priorities. "I guess," he said. "Just try to schedule them when I don't have interviews or networking events." I nodded, already knowing I would be calling Shelley as soon as he left the house. "Thank you. I'll try not to be a burden." If he caught the edge in my voice, he didn't show it. He just nodded and said, "I'm going to get coffee. Need anything while I'm out?" "No, thank you." I smiled tightly. "I'll manage." After he left, I eased myself out of bed and onto my walker. Every movement was an exercise in pain management, but I was determined to reach my home office. I needed to check my financial situation and begin making concrete plans. In the silence of the empty house, I made my way carefully down the hallway. The walls were lined with family photographs. David's graduation, his wedding to Shelley, the girls as infants. Happier times that seemed to mock the present reality. The home office had been James's domain originally, but after his death, I had claimed the space as my own, replacing his massive oak desk with a smaller one that better fit my needs. The file cabinet in the corner contained all our important documents: insurance policies, property deeds, bank statements, and James's will. I lowered myself into the desk chair, wincing as my leg protested the movement. My computer password was James and Ellie 1972, our wedding year. Such a sentimental choice now seemed naive. I made a mental note to change it to something David wouldn't easily guess. First, I checked my bank accounts. My primary checking account showed a balance lower than I expected. Frowning, I scrolled through recent transactions and felt my stomach clench at what I saw. A series of withdrawals, each for $200 or $300, at ATMs near the Riverboat Casino in Alton. David had my debit card. I sat back, the room suddenly spinning. I'd given him the card 2 months ago for a one-time emergency when his car needed repair. He was supposed to have returned it immediately. I checked the dates of the withdrawals, all within the last 3 weeks, totaling nearly $2,000. My hands shook as I moved on to my savings account, where I kept the bulk of my retirement funds. The balance there was intact, thankfully. David didn't have access to that account, but the checking account had been meant to cover my property taxes and insurance for the next 6 months. Hot tears stung my eyes, not just from the betrayal, but from the realization that I had allowed this to happen. I had enabled my son's worst behaviors by making excuses for him, by letting love cloud my judgment. James would be livid. He had always been stricter with David, quicker to enforce consequences for poor choices. After he died, perhaps I had overcompensated, desperate not to lose my son as well as my husband. I wiped my eyes and took a deep breath. Anger would not serve me now. I needed to be strategic. First, I called the bank and reported my debit card stolen. I didn't mention that I knew who had taken it. Then I requested a new card be mailed to me and placed a password on the account that David wouldn't know. Next, I called Dr. Henderson's office to schedule my follow-up appointment and physical therapy. The receptionist was sympathetic when I explained my transportation concerns. "We actually have a service that can pick you up for appointments," she offered. "It's covered by Medicare. Would that help?" Relief washed over me. "That would be perfect. Thank you." After hanging up, I pulled out a notebook and began making lists. Tasks to complete, information to gather, people to contact. I needed to update my will, secure my valuables, and quietly investigate what would be involved in selling the house. The thought of leaving the home where James and I had spent nearly 4 decades together made my chest ache, but I knew he would understand. This house had become a prison, not a sanctuary. I was just finishing my notes when I heard the front door open. Quickly, I closed the notebook and tucked it into the desk drawer. "Mom?" David called out. "Where are you?" "In the office," I answered, keeping my voice steady. "Just checking emails." He appeared in the doorway, coffee in hand. "You should be resting. Doctor's orders." The concern in his voice would have fooled me a day ago. Now I recognized it for what it was, a performance. A habit of saying the right things while his actions told a different story. "You're right," I agreed mildly. "I just needed to check a few things. Would you mind helping me back to the bedroom?" As he supported my elbow while I maneuvered my walker, I thought about the cash withdrawals and wondered how he would react when he discovered the card no longer worked. But that was a confrontation for another day. Today I needed to continue laying the groundwork for my escape. I ran into Mrs. Abernathy at Starbucks, David mentioned, as we slowly made our way down the hall. "She said to tell you the church group is organizing a meal train for you." "That's very kind of them." The thought of my friends from First Presbyterian bringing food meant I wouldn't have to worry about cooking, or about David complaining about leftovers. "Yeah, well, I told her not to worry about it too much. I said I was taking good care of you." I nearly stumbled. The audacity of his statement in light of yesterday's homecoming and this morning's discovery was breathtaking. "That was thoughtful," I managed, "but I think I'll call her later and say we'd appreciate the help." He shrugged. "Whatever. I'm meeting a buddy for lunch to talk about a potential job lead, so I'll be out for a while." "No problem. I think I'll just rest this afternoon." In my bedroom, after David had left again, I finally allowed myself to cry. For the son I had raised but didn't recognize anymore. For the years I had wasted making excuses for his behavior. And for the difficult road ahead. But they were cleansing tears, washing away the fog of denial that had clouded my vision for too long. By the time they dried, I was more resolved than ever. I reached for my phone and dialed Shelley's number. When she answered, I said simply, "I need your help." "Dear, and I think I may finally be able to help you, too." "He what?" Shelley's voice rose in disbelief, causing me to pull the phone slightly away from my ear. I was sitting in my bedroom armchair, leg propped up on the ottoman, speaking in hushed tones though the house was empty. "He's been withdrawing money from my checking account," I repeated. "Using the card I gave him for that car repair back in April." "Ellen, I'm so sorry." Shelley's voice softened. "But I can't say I'm surprised. This is exactly what happened with our joint account before I finally closed it." I closed my eyes, the parallel impossible to ignore. I feel like such a fool. Don't. He's manipulative, and he preys on people who love him. The bitterness in her voice was earned through years of disappointment and broken promises. "What are you going to do?" "I've canceled the card, but that's just the beginning. I'm thinking of moving to Arizona to live near Margaret." The silence on the other end lasted several heartbeats. "Wow, that's big. Are you sure?" "Not entirely," I admitted, "but I know I can't continue like this. And I miss the girls so much, Shelley. He's made it nearly impossible for me to see them." "I know. I've tried telling them you're not avoiding them, but Emma especially keeps asking why Grandma doesn't visit anymore." Her voice caught. "They'd understand if you moved away. It might even be easier for us to visit you there without David interfering." The thought of regular visits with my granddaughters sent a surge of hope through me. "Would you really bring them to Arizona?" "In a heartbeat. My parents are in Colorado, so we could make it a Western States tour." She paused. "But Ellen, what about the house? It's been in your family for so long." The Victorian-style home had indeed been in the family for generations. My parents had left it to me, their only daughter still living in Illinois. The property held decades of memories and was worth a considerable sum in the historic district of our small town. "I've been thinking about that," I said. "If I sell, I could buy a small place in Arizona outright and still have enough to supplement my retirement, but David thinks he's going to inherit it," Shelley finished for me. "Yes." The admission felt like a betrayal, though I wasn't sure anymore who I was betraying. After James died, we discussed it. I promised him the house would be his someday. "When you were in your 80s or 90s, Shelley pointed out. "Not while he's bleeding you dry in your 60s. She was right, of course. The inheritance discussion had been predicated on the assumption that David would be settled, responsible, caring for his aging mother rather than exploiting her. "I know," I said quietly, "but it still feels complicated." "Ellen." Shelley's tone turned serious. "There's something else you should know. David remortgaged his half of our house before the divorce without my knowledge. He forged my signature on the paperwork." My blood ran cold. "What?" "The bank caught it during the divorce proceedings. That's why he got so little in the settlement. The judge ruled that the fraudulent loan was entirely his responsibility." She sighed. "I didn't tell you because I knew how much it would hurt you. But now I'm worried he might try something similar with your house." The implication was clear. My son, desperate for money to fund his gambling addiction, might stoop to forging documents to access the equity in my home. The possibility had never occurred to me, but now it seemed frightfully plausible. "I need to talk to my lawyer," I said, my voice shaking. "Yes, you do. And you need to secure any important documents. Your deed, James's will, insurance policies, anything with your signature that he could potentially copy." My mind raced to the file cabinet in the office. All those documents were there, accessible to David whenever I wasn't home. "Shelley, could you keep some things for me, just until I figure out what to do?" "Of course. I can come by tomorrow while he's out. The girls have a play date, so I could swing by around 11. She hesitated. "Is there anything else you need? Groceries? Help around the house?" The offer brought fresh tears to my eyes. This woman, whom David had vilified for the past 18 months, was showing more concern for my welfare than my own son. "Actually, I have physical therapy appointments starting next week. The office has a transportation service, but I'd feel better having someone I trust go with me for the first one. Would you?" "Absolutely. Text me the details and I'll be there." Her voice warmed. "It's good to talk to you again. Ellen. Really talk, I mean." "For me too, dear. Give the girls my love." After ending the call, I sat quietly, processing the new information. David had committed fraud during his divorce, a serious crime that could have resulted in jail time had Shelley pressed charges. The fact that she hadn't spoke volumes about her character and her desire to shield their daughters from further trauma. But it also raised an alarming question. What would a man capable of forging his wife's signature do when faced with financial desperation again? The house was my most valuable asset, worth at least $320,000 in the current market. For a gambling addict, that kind of equity represented an irresistible temptation. I needed to move quickly, but carefully. Confronting David directly would only alert him to my concerns and potentially trigger more desperate behavior. Instead, I had to secure my assets and establish an exit plan before he realized what was happening. Using my walker, I made my way slowly back to the office. The file cabinet key was hidden in a small ceramic box on the bookshelf. Not particularly secure, but I had never felt the need for better protection in my own home. I unlocked the cabinet and began sorting through the files, pulling out the most important documents: the deed to the house, James's will, our marriage certificate, my birth certificate, insurance policies, and bank account information. I also took the small jewelry box containing my mother's pearls and the diamond earrings James had given me for our 40th anniversary. These items went into a tote bag that I hid in the back of my closet, behind winter coats that wouldn't be needed for months. Tomorrow, they would go with Shelley for safekeeping. Next, I called my attorney, Harold Winters, who had handled James's estate. His secretary put me through immediately. "Ellen, how are you? I heard about your accident," Harold said, his deep voice conveying genuine concern. "News travels fast in this town," I replied with a small laugh. "Margaret Abernathy was in yesterday for her notary renewal. She mentioned you'd had surgery." I explained my situation, the broken femur, David's extended stay, and my concerns about the security of my assets. I didn't mention the bank card theft or my knowledge of David's previous fraud. Some maternal instincts died hard. Harold listened patiently, then said, "I think you're wise to be cautious, Ellen. Here's what I suggest. Let's update your will to be more specific about the terms of inheritance. And let's create a power of attorney document that names someone other than David to make decisions if you're incapacitated." "Margaret," I said without hesitation. "She should be my power of attorney." "Good choice. Now about the house. If you're considering selling, we should start the paperwork soon. Property transactions take time, especially for historic homes with potential easements." We discussed the logistics of preparing the house for sale, the current market conditions, and how to navigate the emotional aspects of informing David after the plans were already in motion. "One more thing," Harold said before we ended the call. "I'd like you to come into the office to sign these documents, but I understand mobility is an issue right now. Would tomorrow work? I can send a car service." "Actually, my daughter-in-law is coming by around 11. Perhaps we could come after that." "Perfect. I'll have everything ready for 1 o'clock. After hanging up, I felt a strange mix of anxiety and relief. The wheels were in motion. Decisions were being made. And for the first time in years, I was the one making them. Not out of deference to David's preferences or fear of upsetting the fragile peace, but out of respect for my own needs and future. The front door opened and closed, followed by David's voice calling out, "Mom, you awake?" I quickly straightened up, pushing the tote bag deeper into the closet with my foot. "In here," I called back. He appeared in the doorway holding a white paper bag. "Brought you a muffin from that bakery you like on 3rd Street. The gesture would have touched me once. Now I couldn't help wondering if it was a preemptive peace offering for when he discovered the debit card no longer worked. "Thank you," I said, accepting the bag. "How was your lunch?" "Good." "Good." He perched on the edge of my bed. "Look, I've been thinking. You're going to need help around here for a while, right? With cooking, cleaning, all that?" I nodded cautiously, unsure where this was heading. "Well, I've got this buddy, Mark, who's between places right now. I was thinking he could crash in the spare room, help out with stuff around the house. He's a good guy, works odd jobs, so he'd be around during the day when I'm out job hunting." The suggestion made my skin crawl. Another unemployed man in my house, eating my food, using my utilities, and helping out in undefined ways. It was clear what this was. David trying to move in reinforcements before I could reclaim my territory. "That's very thoughtful," I said carefully. "But the church ladies are organizing meals, and I've arranged for a home health aide through Medicare. Plus, I think I'll need my privacy during recovery." His expression darkened momentarily before he forced a smile. "Just trying to help, Mom. But sure. But if you've got it covered." "I appreciate the thought," I assured him. "Tell me about this job prospect. Sounds promising?" The distraction worked. David launched into an elaborate description of a major opportunity in commercial real estate, conveniently light on specific details but heavy on potential future earnings. I nodded and made appropriate noises of interest while mentally reviewing my escape plan. Tomorrow, secure documents with Shelley, visit Harold's office, begin legal proceedings. Next week, start physical therapy, call real estate agents for house valuations. By month's end, have a firm moving plan in place. As David talked, I studied his face, the features that reminded me of James, the expressions that were uniquely his own. I searched for traces of the thoughtful boy who had once brought me wild flowers from the backyard, the teenager who had saved up for months to buy me a birthstone necklace for Christmas, the young man who had danced with me at his wedding with tears in his eyes. Those traces were still there, buried beneath years of self-centered choices and the ravages of addiction. I wasn't abandoning that son. I was refusing to enable the man he had become. The distinction felt important. "So what do you think?" David asked, pulling me from my thoughts. I realized I had lost track of his monologue. "It sounds very promising," I said, hoping that was an appropriate response. He grinned. "I knew you'd be on board. I'll tell him the good news." Wait, what good news? What had I just agreed to? "Tell who?" "Mark, about staying here." David stood up. "He can move his stuff in this weekend. Don't worry, he doesn't have much." Panic flared in my chest. "David, no. I said I didn't want anyone else staying here." His expression changed, hardening in a way that had become familiar over recent months. "Actually, Mom, you said it was thoughtful and you appreciated it." I took that as a yes. "Well, it wasn't," I said firmly, straightening my shoulders despite the pain it caused. "This is my house, and I'm not comfortable having a stranger living here while I'm recovering from surgery." David's face flushed. "Mark's not a stranger. He's my friend, and he really needs a place right now." "Then perhaps he could stay at his friend's apartment," I suggested, maintaining eye contact despite the tension crackling between us. "You know my place is too small," he muttered, though we both knew he had a 2-bedroom apartment that he'd stopped paying rent on months ago, leading to his temporary stay with me. "I'm sorry, but the answer is no." I kept my voice level but firm. "And David, we need to talk about your plans. You've been here for over a year now. I think it's time we discussed a timeline for you to find your own place again." The look he gave me was equal parts shock and betrayal, as if I had violated some unspoken agreement. In a way, I had. The agreement that I would continue to sacrifice my own well-being for his comfort. "Wow," he said after a moment. "You break one bone and suddenly you're kicking me out? Real nice, Mom." The manipulation was so transparent it almost made me laugh. "I'm not kicking you out. I'm asking you to start making plans. There's a difference." He stood abruptly. "I need to make some calls. We'll talk about this later when you're thinking more clearly." The dismissal, the implication that my reasonable boundary indicated confused thinking, ignited a slow-burning anger in my chest, but I let him go without further comment. This confrontation was just the beginning, and I needed to conserve my emotional energy for the battles ahead. After he stormed out, I picked up my phone and texted Shelley. "Plans moving forward. See you at 11 tomorrow. Also, please don't tell anyone about Arizona yet." Her reply came quickly. "My lips are sealed. Rest up. Tomorrow is day 1 of the rest of your life." As I sat there, my leg throbbing but my resolve strengthening, I found myself looking forward to that new life with a hope I hadn't felt in years. Whatever David's reaction to my plans might be, I was reclaiming my power, one painful step at a time. The digital clock by my bed read 2:17 a.m. when I was jarred awake by the sound of raised voices from the living room. I blinked in the darkness, disoriented until I recognized David's voice, slurred and belligerent, alongside another male voice I didn't recognize. "Keep it down, man, my mom's sleeping," David was saying, though his attempt at a whisper was laughably loud. "You said she had the good stuff," the other voice replied. "Oxy, Percocet, prescription grade." My blood ran cold. Were they talking about my pain medication? "In her bathroom, probably," David said. "I'll check." The sound of heavy footsteps approached my bedroom door. Panic surged through me as I realized my vulnerability. A 65-year-old woman with a broken leg, alone with two intoxicated men looking for narcotics. I reached for my phone on the nightstand and quietly pressed the emergency call button. When the 911 operator answered, I whispered, "There are intruders in my house looking for drugs. 1423 Maple Street. Please hurry." The operator began asking questions. But I had to end the call as my bedroom door creaked open. I quickly placed the phone face down beside me and pretended to be asleep. Through slitted eyes, I watched David's silhouette as he stood in the doorway, swaying slightly. After a moment, he moved toward my ensuite bathroom. I heard him rummaging through the medicine cabinet. The rattling of pill bottles, unmistakable in the quiet house. "Found them," he called in a stage whisper as he emerged from the bathroom, several orange prescription bottles in his hands. He was stealing my medication, not just any medication, but the powerful painkillers I needed for my post-surgical recovery. My own son. Before I could decide whether to confront him or continue feigning sleep, flashing lights illuminated the bedroom window. Police sirens wailed in the distance, rapidly growing louder. David froze. "What the—" "Cops!" his friend shouted from the living room. "Let's go!" The pill bottles tumbled from David's hands as he rushed out of my bedroom. I heard the back door slam, followed by the sound of running footsteps through the yard. Seconds later, there was pounding on the front door. "Police! Open up!" Using my walker, I made my slow, painful way to the front of the house. Through the peephole, I could see two officers on my porch, hands on their service weapons. "I'm coming," I called. "I'm disabled. It takes me a moment." When I finally opened the door, the officers looked relieved to see me. "Ma'am, we received a 911 call from this address," the female officer said. "Are you all right?" "Yes," I said, my voice shaking. "I'm the one who called. My son and his friend was stealing my prescription pain medication." They took my statement as one officer checked the house to ensure no one was still hiding inside. I showed them the scattered pill bottles in my bedroom, explaining my recent surgery and David's increasingly concerning behavior. "Do you want to press charges, Mrs. Reynolds?" the male officer asked gently. The question stopped me cold. Did I want my only child to have a criminal record? Would that help him or just push him further into desperation? I don't know, I admitted. He needs help, not jail. "I understand," the female officer, Officer Martinez, according to her nameplate, said. "But sometimes the legal system is the only way to get someone into mandatory treatment programs." She had a point. Nothing I had done so far had convinced David to address his gambling addiction. Perhaps this was the wake-up call he needed. "Can I think about it? Talk to my lawyer in the morning?" "Of course," Officer Martinez said. "We'll file the report about the attempted theft. You can decide about pressing charges within the next few days." After they left, having helped me collect and secure my medications in a lockbox they provided, I sat in my armchair, too shaken to return to bed. The reality of what had just happened washed over me in waves. My son had brought a stranger into my home in the middle of the night to steal my medication I legitimately needed for excruciating pain. The line had been crossed. Any lingering doubt about my need to separate myself from David vanished in that moment. I picked up my phone and texted Margaret. "It's happening sooner than we planned. How quickly can the guest house be ready?" Her reply came almost instantly despite the hour. "It's ready now. Just say when." I next texted Shelley. "Change of plans. Can you come first thing in the morning?" "Emergency." Then I called Harold's answering service and left a message asking him to prepare the house for immediate sale, rather than the gradual process we had discussed. By the time dawn broke over the neighborhood, I had made my decision. I would not press criminal charges against David yet, but I would use the incident as leverage to force him into treatment. with the understanding that if he refused, the police report was already on file. I dozed fitfully in the chair until I heard a soft knock at the front door around 7:30 a.m. Looking through the peephole, I saw Shelley, concern etched on her face. I opened the door, and she gasped at the sight of me, still in my nightgown, exhausted, with tear tracks on my cheeks. "Ellen, what happened?" She helped me back to the armchair, kneeling beside me as I recounted the night's events. Her face paled, then flushed with anger. "That's it. You're coming home with me today. The girls are at school, and the guest room is already made up." "But David can deal with the police when he decides to show his face again," she said firmly. "You need to be somewhere safe while we sort this out." For the first time, I didn't argue. The thought of returning to my bedroom, where hours earlier my son had rifled through my belongings, looking for drugs to steal, made me physically ill. "Okay," I agreed. "Let me pack a bag." Shelley helped me gather essentials, clothes, toiletries, medications, now secured in the police-provided lockbox, and the tote bag of important documents I'd hidden in the closet. As we worked, I explained my accelerated plan. "I'll stay with you for a week or two while Harold expedites the house listing. Then once physical therapy clears me for travel, I'll fly to Arizona." "What about your things?" Shelley asked, gesturing around the house filled with decades of memories. "I'll hire a service to pack what I want to keep. The rest can be sold or donated." The decisiveness in my voice surprised even me. After years of preserving James's belongings as if he might return at any moment, I was suddenly ready to let go of the physical remnants of our life together. The memories, the ones that truly mattered, would travel with me regardless. We were just loading the car when David's Chevy pulled into the driveway. He sat behind the wheel for a long moment, staring at us through the windshield, before slowly emerging. He looked terrible. Bloodshot eyes, rumpled clothes, a day's growth of stubble on his chin. But it was the expression on his face that struck me most, a mixture of defiance and shame that reminded me of his teenage years when he'd been caught skipping school. "Mom?" His voice cracked. What's going on? Why is she here?" He jerked his head toward Shelley without looking at her. I leaned on my walker, grateful for Shelley's steadying presence beside me. "I'm going to stay with Shelley for a while." "What? Why?" Then as understanding dawned, his expression darkened. "Because of last night? The HDE?" "Mom, I was drunk. I wasn't thinking clearly. Mark said he knew someone who'd buy—" He cut himself off, seeming to realize that admitting to planned drug dealing wasn't helping his case. "It doesn't matter why," I said quietly. "What matters is that I no longer feel safe in my own home." The words hung in the air between us, their weight crushing the last vestiges of our pretense that everything was normal. "So you're choosing her over me? Your own son?" He gestured angrily towards Shelley, who remained silent but kept a protective hand on my elbow. "I'm choosing myself, David, for the first time in years." I met his gaze steadily. "The police have a report about last night. I haven't decided whether to press charges yet." His face drained of color. "You called the cops on me." "You brought a stranger into my house to steal my medication," I reminded him. "What did you expect me to do?" He had no answer for that. Instead, he switched tactics. "Where am I supposed to go?" "You have an apartment," Shelley interjected, speaking for the first time. "The one you claimed you couldn't afford rent on while somehow managing to spend hundreds at the casino every week." David's head snapped toward her. "Stay out of this. This is between me and my mother." "No." "David, it's not," I said firmly. "Not anymore. I've enabled your behavior for too long, and it stops today. You have two choices. Enter a treatment program for your gambling addiction with my emotional and financial support, or face potential criminal charges and certainly lose any future inheritance." His mouth opened and closed wordlessly, shock evident on his face. This was not the mother he was accustomed to, the one who made excuses for him, who prioritized his comfort over her own, who could be manipulated with the right combination of guilt and charm. "You can't be serious," he finally managed. "I've never been more serious in my life." I nodded to Shelley, who opened the passenger door of her car for me. "Harold Winters has all the information about treatment options. His office will be open at 9. The choice is yours." As Shelley helped me into the car, David called out, "Mom, wait! We can talk about this!" But I was done talking. As we pulled away from the curb, I caught a final glimpse of him in the side mirror, standing alone in the driveway of the house where he had grown up, looking lost and suddenly very small. In Shelley's car, driving through the familiar streets of the town I had called home for over 40 years, I felt a curious lightness despite the physical pain and emotional turmoil. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I was moving toward something of my own choosing, rather than merely reacting to the demands and crises created by others. "You did the right thing," Shelley said softly, reaching over to squeeze my hand. "It wasn't easy, but it was right." "I know," I replied, surprised to find that I truly did. "It's just the beginning, isn't it?" She nodded. "But you're not alone, Ellen. Not anymore." As we turned onto her street, lined with modest homes and budding trees, I thought about the journey ahead, the difficult conversations, the logistical challenges, the physical recovery, the eventual move to Arizona. None of it would be easy, but with each painful step on my broken leg, I was walking away from a life that had broken me in less visible but equally devastating ways. And that made every step worthwhile. The first week at Shelley's home passed in a blur of phone calls, legal consultations, and physical therapy assessments. David had left 3 voicemails and a dozen text messages, alternating between angry accusations and tearful apologies. I hadn't responded to any of them on Harold's advice. Instead, I channeled my energy into healing, both my body and my life. Shelley's guest room became my sanctuary. It was small but comfortable, decorated in soothing blues and grays. Most importantly, it was on the first floor, with an adjacent bathroom equipped with grab bars and a shower seat that Shelley had installed immediately after bringing me home. The girls, Emma 10 and Lily 8, had been initially confused by my sudden presence, but quickly adapted with the resilience of childhood. They appointed themselves my official helpers, bringing me cups of tea, reading to me in the evenings, and creating elaborate get-well cards with glitter that seemed to multiply across every surface, despite Shelley's best efforts at containment. On the 8th day of my stay, Harold called with news that sent a ripple of both excitement and trepidation through me. "Ellen, I've got a potential buyer for the house," he announced without preamble. "The Murphys. You know, the couple that renovated the old Peterson place on Elm." "Already?" I couldn't hide my surprise. We had only officially listed the property 3 days earlier. They've been looking for another project in the historic district. They saw the listing and called immediately. They're offering full asking price, all cash, with a 60-day close but flexible move-out terms to accommodate your situation. It was the ideal scenario, a quick, clean sale to buyers with a proven track record of respecting historic homes. But the reality of it still took my breath away. "That's wonderful," I managed, "and overwhelming." "I understand," Harold said gently. "It's a big step, but from a strategic standpoint, Ellen, I recommend we accept. This kind of offer doesn't come along every day, especially with the flexible terms." "I agree. Let's move forward." Despite the emotion clouding my voice, my decision was clear. After ending the call, I sat quietly on the edge of the guest bed, processing the news. The home where I had raised my son, where James and I had grown old together, where every holiday and milestone had been celebrated for 4 decades, it would soon belong to strangers. A soft knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Shelley peeked in, her expression concerned. "Everything okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." "In a way, I have." I patted the spot beside me and she sat down. "The house sold. Full price, cash offer." "Oh, Aileen." She wrapped an arm around my shoulders. "That's wonderful news, but I know it must be hard too." I nodded, unable to separate the tangle of emotions: relief, grief, anticipation, fear. It's the right decision. It's just final, in a way that nothing else has been. "Have you told David yet?" I shook my head. Harold advised against it until the contracts are signed. Given his state of mind, we both knew what was left unsaid, that David, desperate and angry, might attempt to interfere with the sale or make claims on the property. According to Harold, while David had no legal standing to prevent me from selling my own home, he could potentially create complications that would delay the process or scare off buyers. "How is he doing?" I asked. Though I hadn't responded to David's messages, Shelley had kept me informed about his general situation through mutual acquaintances. "From what I hear, he's staying with that friend, Mark. He showed up at Cornerstone Realty yesterday, asking about job openings." She hesitated. "And he's been calling the girls' school, trying to arrange to see them." A fresh wave of concern washed over me. "He hasn't tried to pick them up, has he?" "No. The school knows he doesn't have permission. But Emma's teacher said he seemed unstable." She squeezed my hand. "I've been thinking about a restraining order." The thought of my son's situation deteriorating to the point where legal protection was necessary made my chest ache. But I understood Shelley's caution. David's behavior had become increasingly erratic, and his sense of entitlement where the girls were concerned had always been problematic. "Do what you need to do to protect them," I said. "I support you completely." She nodded, relief evident in her expression. "Thank you. That means a lot." After a moment, she added, "On a brighter note, your physical therapist called. She said you're making excellent progress. The transport service will pick you up for your appointment tomorrow at 10. The topic change was welcome. My physical recovery had indeed been proceeding better than expected, according to the young, enthusiastic therapist who had been working with me. The pain was still considerable, but my mobility was improving daily, and the prognosis for a full recovery was excellent. "I've been practicing those exercises religiously," I admitted. "The sooner I'm mobile, the sooner I can get to Arizona." Margaret and I had been in daily contact, planning my transition to the guest house on her property. She had already stocked the kitchen with basics, arranged for weekly cleaning service, and researched physical therapists in her area who could continue my rehabilitation. The doorbell rang, interrupting our conversation. Shelley frowned. "That's odd. I'm not expecting anyone." She went to answer it while I reached for my walker, curious about the unexpected visitor. From the guest room, I couldn't see the front door, but I heard the voices clearly enough. Shelley's, tight with tension, and then David's, loud and insistent. "I know she's here, Shelley. I need to talk to her." "This isn't a good time, David. She's resting." "Bullshit. Just let me see her for 5 minutes. She's my mother." I moved as quickly as my healing leg would allow, making my way to the living room just as Shelley was saying, "I'm going to have to ask you to leave." David stood in the doorway, unshaven and hollow-eyed, but surprisingly sober-looking. When he saw me, his expression shifted from anger to something more complicated, relief tinged with shame. "Mom?" He took a half-step forward, but Shelley remained firmly in his path. "Hello, David." I kept my voice neutral. "What brings you here?" "What brings me here?" He laughed, a harsh sound without humor. "You disappeared from the house, won't answer my calls, and now there's a for sale sign in the yard. What do you think brings me here?" So he knew about the house. I should have expected as much. In a small town like ours, real estate news traveled fast. "I think we should talk about this outside," Shelley said firmly, glancing meaningfully at the staircase behind us, where I knew the girls were in their rooms. "No, we'll talk about it right here," David insisted, his voice rising. "You're selling our house without even discussing it with me? After promising it would be mine someday." The accusation hung in the air, not entirely without merit. I had indeed discussed inheritance with him, though never with any formal agreement or timeline. "David," I said quietly, "what did you expect would happen after that night? You brought a stranger into my home to steal my medication." He flinched as if struck. "I told you I was drunk. I wasn't thinking clearly." "That's been your excuse for far too long," I replied, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. The drinking, the gambling, moving in with me indefinitely while contributing nothing. It all stops now. "So your solution is to sell the house out from under me? Where am I supposed to go?" The plaintive note in his voice might have swayed me once, but not anymore. "You're 43 years old, David. Where you go is your responsibility, not mine." I gripped the walker tighter, both for physical support and to ground myself emotionally. "I offered you treatment. Harold has the information waiting for you. Have you even called him?" His silence was answer enough. That's what I thought. I sighed. "The house is being sold. I'm moving to Arizona to live near Aunt Margaret. These decisions aren't up for discussion." "Arizona?" He looked genuinely shocked. "You're moving across the country. What about the girls? What about me?" "The girls will visit me there," I said. "As for you, that depends entirely on your choices from this point forward." He stared at me for a long moment, seeming to truly see me, perhaps for the first time in years. "You're really doing this?" It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "Yes, I am." Something in his expression shifted then, hardening into a cold anger that sent a chill down my spine, despite the warmth of the spring day. "You'll regret this," he said quietly. "Both of you." His gaze flickered between Shelley and me. "This isn't over." Before either of us could respond, he turned and stalked back to his car, slamming the door with enough force to rattle the windows. Shelley quickly closed and locked the front door, leaning against it as if to physically block any return attempt. "That went well," she said, her voice laced with sarcasm despite the tremor in her hands. "I'm calling the lawyer about that restraining order," I said. "Today." She nodded, then froze as Emma called down from upstairs. "Mom, was that Dad?" We exchanged a look of shared concern before Shelley called back. "Yes, honey, but he had to leave. Everything's fine." But as we both knew, everything was far from fine. David's parting words hadn't been merely the emotional outburst of a disappointed son. They had carried the weight of a threat. And given what I now knew about his capacity for dishonesty and manipulation, it was a threat I couldn't afford to ignore. Later that day, with restraining order paperwork filed and extra security measures in place at Shelley's home, I called Margaret to update her on the situation. "I think we need to move up the timeline," I concluded after explaining David's visit. "How soon can you come?" "I'm checking flights now," my sister replied, the clicking of keyboard keys audible in the background. "There's one tomorrow afternoon. I could be there by evening." "That would be wonderful." The relief in my voice was palpable. "The house sale is moving forward, but I don't want to wait for closing. I can access enough savings to cover the move now, and the sale proceeds can be handled remotely." "Ellen," Margaret said, her voice gentle but firm, "don't worry about the money. Robert and I have more than enough to cover whatever you need. We can sort out the finances after you're safely here." The generosity brought tears to my eyes, not just the financial offer, but the unhesitating support behind it. "Thank you. I don't know what I'd do without you." "That's what family is for," she replied simply. "The real kind. not the kind that steals your pain medication. Despite everything, I found myself laughing at her bluntness. You always did call it like you see it. Marge. Someone has to... Now let me make these arrangements. I'll text you the flight details, and we'll talk in the morning. That night, as I lay in Shelley's guest bed, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of her home settling, I thought about the path that had led me here. Just 2 weeks ago, I had been a different person, one who prioritized peace over justice, who accepted disrespect to avoid confrontation, who had confused self-sacrifice with love. The broken femur that had initially seemed like such a devastating setback had instead become the catalyst for reclaiming my life. Sometimes, I reflected, we need to be broken before we can heal properly. Tomorrow, Margaret would arrive. Within days, I would leave Illinois for the first time in nearly 20 years. The future stretched before me, uncertain in many ways, but undeniably mine to shape. The thought brought not fear, but a deep, sustaining peace that finally allowed me to drift into dreamless sleep. "Graham, look! I can see the mountains from my window!" Lily's excited voice echoed through the small guest house, where she was exploring every nook and cranny with the enthusiasm only an 8-year-old can muster. "They're beautiful, aren't they?" I replied, smiling at her wonder. "And if you look carefully in the mornings, and sometimes you can see hot air balloons floating over the valley. Really, can we go in one?" She bounced on her toes, pigtails bobbing. "Maybe for a special occasion," I hedged, not entirely comfortable with the thought of that dangling thousands of feet in the air in a wicker basket, but unwilling to dampen her excitement. It was the girls' first visit to my new home in Arizona, a trip that Shelley had arranged as a surprise for my 70th birthday. 4 years had passed since I had left Illinois. 4 years of healing and rebuilding in the desert sunshine. The guest house on Margaret and Robert's property had become my sanctuary. With its adobe walls and tile floors, it was as different from my Victorian home in Illinois as possible. Yet I had grown to love its simple, functional beauty. The small courtyard garden I had cultivated was thriving despite the harsh climate, much like I was. "Mom says lunch is ready on the patio," Emma announced, entering from the main house where Shelley was helping Margaret prepare a birthday meal. At 14, Emma was on the cusp of adolescence, tall and thoughtful with her father's eyes, but thankfully, her mother's steady temperament. "Tell them we'll be right there," I said, setting aside the book I had been pretending to read while actually watching Lily explore. My leg, long since healed, still occasionally ached in cold weather, but here in the Arizona heat, it gave me little trouble. As we walked across the flagstone path connecting the guest house to the main residence, I marveled at how different my life was now compared to that day when I had returned from the hospital after femur surgery. The memory of David's callous question, "So, is dinner ready yet?" still had the power to sting, but it had lost much of its emotional charge with time and distance. David had not taken the changes in his life well. After my departure, he had escalated his troubling behavior, resulting in not only the restraining order, but eventually criminal charges when he had broken into Shelley's garage, apparently looking for items I might have left behind. The court had given him a choice between jail time and a rehabilitation program. He had chosen the latter, completing a 6-month residential treatment for gambling addiction. Our contact since then had been minimal and strictly controlled. Occasional emails, monitored phone calls during his treatment, and later, carefully structured visits with the girls under Shelley's supervision. He had never visited me in Arizona, though the invitation remained open, provided he maintained his sobriety and respect for boundaries. The last I had heard, he was working steadily at a construction company in Chicago, sharing an apartment with a coworker, and making regular child support payments for the first time in years. It wasn't the life he had envisioned for himself, heir to a historic home, successful real estate broker, but it was an honest life, and that counted for something. "There's the birthday girl," Margaret called, as we approached the shaded patio where the table had been set for lunch. At 73, my sister remained vibrant and active, her silver hair cut in a stylish bob that framed her tanned face. Robert, her husband of nearly 50 years, stood at the grill, spatula in hand. Perfect timing, the salmon is just about done. Shelley emerged from the house carrying a pitcher of lemonade, looking relaxed in a way I rarely saw during those tense final months in Illinois. The desert seemed to suit her as well. She had accepted a teaching position at a local elementary school 2 years ago, moving herself and the girls to a small house just 10 minutes from Margaret's property. "Happy birthday." "Ellen," she said, leaning down to kiss my cheek. 70 looks good on you." "Flattery will get you everywhere," I laughed, though privately I had to agree. My health had improved dramatically since the move. Not just the healed femur, but lower blood pressure, better sleep, and a general sense of well-being that no medication could provide. As we gathered around the table, sharing food and conversation under the dappled shade of the patio, I found myself observing the scene as if from a slight distance, taking mental photographs to revisit during quieter moments. Emma rolling her eyes good-naturedly at one of Robert's corny jokes. Lily, carefully arranging her food so nothing touched, a quirk she had maintained since toddlerhood. Margaret, refilling glasses and discreetly adjusting the umbrella to ensure I remained in the shade. Shelley, relaxed and laughing, the worry lines that had once creased her forehead now rarely visible. This was my family now, not defined by blood or obligation, but by choice and mutual respect. The realization brought a fullness to my heart that I hadn't expected on this milestone birthday. After lunch, while the girls helped clear the table, Shelley sat beside me on the cushioned patio bench. "I have something to tell you," she said quietly. "I didn't want to mention it before lunch, but David called this morning." My pulse quickened slightly. "Oh?" "He wanted to wish you happy birthday. Asked if he could talk to you." She studied my face carefully. "I told him I'd ask you first." I considered the request. David's recovery had been a long, uneven journey, periods of progress interspersed with setbacks, sincere apologies followed by subtle attempts at manipulation. But the truly destructive behaviors seemed behind him, and the reports from his therapy sessions were encouraging. "Yes," I decided. "I'd like to talk to him." Shelley looked relieved. "I thought you might. He said he'd call back around 3. She hesitated. "He also mentioned he has some news. Sounded positive, but he wanted to tell you himself." Curiosity stirred within me. David had been notably circumspect about his personal life during our limited communications, focusing mainly on his work and occasionally his interactions with the girls during supervised visits. "I'll look forward to it," I said, and found that I genuinely meant it. The afternoon passed pleasantly with gift opening, a handmade quilt from Margaret, books from Shelley, carefully crafted cards from the girls, and birthday cake on the patio. At precisely 3 o'clock, my phone rang. I took the call in the privacy of the guest house, settling into my favorite chair by the window that overlooked the desert landscape. "Hello, David." "Hi, Mom." His voice sounded clearer, steadier than I remembered. "Happy birthday." "Thank you. It's nice to hear from you." There was a slight pause. "How are you feeling?" 70, huh?" "Hard to believe," I acknowledged. "But I feel better than I did at 65, that's for certain." "Good, that's good." Another pause. "Look, Mom, I've been wanting to tell you something for a while, but I wanted to wait until it was official." "Oh?" "I'm engaged." The words came out in a rush. "Her name is Teresa. She's a nurse. We met at a recovery meeting about a year ago." Surprise and cautious pleasure mingled within me. "That's wonderful news, David. Tell me about her." She's amazing, Mom. Tough but kind. Doesn't take any of my crap. He laughed softly. Reminds me of you, actually, in some ways. The comparison touched me unexpectedly. I look forward to meeting her someday. Actually, that's the other part of why I called. His voice took on a hesitant quality. We're thinking of having a small ceremony. Very small and, well, I was hoping you might be there. The invitation hung between us, weighted with all the history, pain, and tentative steps toward reconciliation of the past 4 years. I'd like that, I said simply. His exhale was audible. Really? You're not just saying that. No, I mean it. As long as you understand I won't be alone. Shelley and the girls will be with me. Of course. He paused. Actually, I already talked to Shelley about it. She's been really decent about everything. Better than I deserve. The admission and acknowledgement of his past behavior without excuses or deflection was perhaps the most encouraging sign yet of his continued growth. When are you thinking? I asked. September. Nothing fancy. Teresa's church has a small garden that her pastor said we could use. He cleared his throat. She wants to have kids, soon. She's 38. The thought of more grandchildren, siblings for Emma and Lily, brought an unexpected surge of emotion. That's wonderful, David. Yeah, his voice softened. I'm trying to do things right this time, Mom. Really trying. I believe you are, I said, and realized I truly did. The David who had stood in my bedroom doorway with stolen pill bottles in his hands seemed like a stranger compared to the man on the phone now. We talked for a while longer, about his job, the engagement, his continuing therapy. As the conversation wound down, he said, "There's one more thing, Mom. I've been saving for a plane ticket. I thought maybe I could come out there sometime, see where you live now, if that would be okay." The request was delivered with a tentativeness that spoke volumes about how much our relationship had changed. Once, he would have simply announced his arrival, expecting accommodation without question. I think that could be arranged, I said carefully. Let's talk about it more after the wedding. Sure. No rush. The relief in his voice was palpable. Hey, I should let you get back to your birthday. Teresa's waiting to take me to dinner. Thank you for calling. David, and congratulations on your engagement. After we said our goodbyes, I sat quietly for a moment, processing the conversation. The anger and resentment that had once dominated my feelings toward my son had gradually transformed over the years into something more complex, caution tempered with hope, disappointment balanced by occasional pride in his progress. I wasn't naive enough to believe that all the damage had been repaired or that David's recovery was guaranteed to continue without setbacks. But for the first time in many years, I could envision a future where my son was a positive presence in my life rather than a source of pain and anxiety. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Shelley peeked in, her expression questioning. Everything okay? I nodded, a smile spreading across my face. Better than okay, actually. David's engaged. He told you? That's wonderful. She sat on the arm of my chair. Teresa is good for him, very grounded. She came to the last visit with the girls. They really liked her. You've met her? I was surprised. Just the once. She stayed in the background mostly, but I could tell she was assessing the situation, making sure he was behaving appropriately. Shelley smiled. She reminds me a little of your sister. Actually, no nonsense. The comparison made me laugh. Poor David, surrounded by strong-willed women his entire life. It's what he needs, Shelley said simply. As we rejoined the others on the patio, where Robert was setting up a board game for the girls, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me here. 5 years ago, I had been a woman in pain, physically from a broken bone, emotionally from a broken family dynamic. The moment of clarity had come with those 6 simple words from my son as I stood, barely able to balance on my walker. "So, is dinner ready yet?" That moment had forced me to confront the unhealthy patterns I had allowed to develop, to recognize my own complicity in enabling behaviors that harmed both David and myself. The decision to reclaim my life, to value my own well-being as much as I had always valued others, had been the hardest and most important choice I had ever made. The path hadn't been straight or easy. There had been moments of doubt, of grief for the family life I had imagined, of worry for the son I still loved despite everything. But standing in the warm Arizona sunshine, surrounded by people who respected my boundaries and valued my presence, I knew beyond doubt that I had made the right choice. "Graham, it's your turn," Lily called, gesturing impatiently at the game board. "Coming, sweetheart," I replied, moving to join them. At 70, I had learned that healing is rarely a destination, but rather a continuing journey. The broken places, whether bones or relationships, may mend imperfectly, with visible scars and occasional twinges to remind us of past pain. But with proper care and boundaries, they can become stronger at the broken places, more resilient, and better equipped to weather future storms. As I took my place at the table, picking up the dice with fingers slightly stiffened by age but still capable, I said a silent thank you to the woman I had been 5 years ago, the one who had found the courage to say enough to take that first painful step toward a better life. She had given me the greatest birthday gift of all, the freedom to write my own story, on my own terms, surrounded by love that nourished rather than depleted. "Make a wish, Graham," Emma urged as I shook the dice. I smiled at her, at all of them, my chosen family, my true home. "I already have everything I could wish for," I said, and rolled. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.